Thank you very much, and welcome to this episode of Focus on Parliament. As always, we discuss issues pertinent before the Parliament of Uganda, but also in the general discourse of the governance of Uganda and how we approach several issues. In issue today stems from a petition placed before Parliament by Honorable Okot Olaa, both on 20th of March 2025, to request for the support of the Parliament on the mission in South Sudan, stemming from the Memorandum of Understanding between Uganda and South Sudan signed in 2014. This followed, of course, retrospectively, the engagement of the Ugandan forces in the upper province of South Sudan, particularly on the request of President Salva Kiir, to counter what they call the White Army. In issue today are several points of discussion, but I think we can generally note that indeed Ugandan forces have been deployed in South Sudan under the request of Salva Kiir. That also indeed the first Vice President, Dr. Riek Machar, who is also the commander of SPLMIO, is under arrest. And we have seen today, of course, the condemnation of this arrest by Western forces, by Western countries. To discuss and break down this issue today is a very capable and distinguished army, starting from my immediate left, the Honorable Paul Mwiru, a former MP, Jinja City. You're most welcome.
Thank you.
Yes. We also have Professor Mwambutsya Ndebesa, Professor of History at Makerere University and a political analyst. You're most welcome.
Thank you. Good morning to the viewers. Glad to be here to share with you issues now not only of national importance but equally of regional importance.
All right. Thank you very much. You're most welcome, Professor. And
Thank
of
you.
course, we have Dr. Tolit Atiya, who is a political economy researcher, governance and security expert, but also the Associate Director of CCG, Center for Constitutional Governance. You're most welcome.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here, and we hope this is another exciting afternoon.
All right. Thank you. I would like to start with you, Professor, to just break down this topic. 2011, we have independence of South Sudan. Immediately, war breaks out. That goes on until 2018, where we have this revitalized agreement that has brought peace and stability for at least 7 to 8 years. We see now conflict breaking out again. Maybe for the utility of our audience, you could guide us on the historical conflict and why this issue seems never to end, or decades and decades.
Thank you. I think we need to look at the challenges of South Sudan from the perspective of the challenges of emergent states in Africa. Most states in Africa have had those challenges, especially when the structural conditions in those countries were such that it was not very easy to get a harmonious relationship between the different nationalities that were forcefully brought together by the British. The case of South Sudan, or Sudan generally, is that they did have even a lot of polarization or differences, possibly more than most countries in Africa, because you have the pluralism of religion, where mostly the northern part were Muslims and the southern parts were Christians.
This is within South Sudan.
No, I'm just giving you the whole picture of Sudan.
Sudan, yes.
And then you had the question of Arabs or people of Arab extraction, although they are really Africans, in the north, and then the blacks in the south. And then when it comes to South Sudan, you also have different ethnic groups who were developed differently. They were not, the British did not do much to unite these different nationalities. They brought them together into one state, I think Southern Sudan, as a kind of a province which evolved differently from North Sudan. But the different communities of Southern Sudan were never there was no conscious move to bring them together. So when the war in Sudan between the rebels who were fighting for autonomy, for Southern Sudan autonomy, were fighting with Northern Sudan, the Khartoum government, the primary contradiction was racism and religion. But there was already a secondary contradiction, which was ethnicity or tribalism. It was going on, but it was secondary. Somehow they would cover it up and fight north, but the other one was simmering, and there were no deliberate efforts, I think, to resolve that contradiction. So now they get independence. Before they got independence, actually, this gentleman,
Riek
Machar had already actually fought the Dinka group.
Yes.
So the Nuer and the Dinka and other groups, by the way, sometimes we think that Southern Sudan issues of ethnicity are around those two, because there are very many ethnic groups like most of these African countries.
Yes.
And each one has its own history, has its own sentiments, and there has not been a deliberate effort to bring them together around what, in my opinion, I call civic values, which they all can embrace and have a sentiment around those. Civic values like unity in diversity, like social equality, like freedoms and liberties, like inclusiveness, and things like that. They have remained with their traditional tribal ethnic values. Now, when they become an independent state, these which were secondary contradictions now become primary contradictions. So they start fighting, and their leaders, unfortunately, behaved like tribal kings. Each of these leaders, whether it is Salva Kiir, whether it is Riek Machar, they all behave like tribal leaders to protect or to advance the values and interests of each of these component parts of the ethnic group. So there have been efforts, external especially, to bring these people together. But I don't think you can create a nation state using external strategies, the external forces. They have failed in Afghanistan, they have failed in Iraq, they have failed in Libya, they have failed in many places. There is a need for internal dynamics to be facilitated if you want, but not to interfere with them like we have done. Now, when this latest war breaks out, or misunderstanding breaks out, I don't think that Uganda should have gone there like it has done, because President Museveni and Uganda talks about Pan-Africanism. And there are Pan-African institutions. There is East African Community, there is IGAD, there is AU, which should have been approached. And so we would have had a multilateral approach, a multilateral strategy to solve that problem. Even if Museveni and Uganda wanted to send their UPDF to stop the situation from escalating, it should have been under the auspices of a Pan-African regional organization, so that we are not blamed as individuals.
But Professor, in the presence of a bilateral understanding between the two countries, does it not make a case for Uganda's involvement?
You see, this bilateral agreement you are talking about is neither here nor there. It is a bilateral agreement between who and who. It seems it is between Museveni and Salva Kiir, but not the population. How come that the Nuer now are talking against us? Do you think Machar now supports us, or whatever the case may be? So there was a need for a multilateral involvement. By the way, we can even have clashes there like we have had clashes in Congo. I have had some fears that Ethiopia is not comfortable with us being there. They disagree with us. Maybe Kenya might disagree. Uganda can disagree. And we have clashes like we had in Kisangani within Southern Sudan. So we should have gone there under a multilateral arrangement. And to do what? Maybe to separate these warring factions and create incentives for them to go for a negotiated political settlement and go for elections. When we go the way we have gone, Uganda has gone, and it is now even I'm told it is on offensive, not the defensive. They should have gone there to say, parallel this line, you stop there, this one stop here. We shall.
But the White Army is a rebel. Is a rebel a non-state outfit.
Yeah, NRA was a rebel outfit. Now, if an external
so
group,
is it possible? Maybe Doctor can also guide.
But let me finish on that one.
Yes, yes.
If an external force, an external country had interfered with us, how far would we have gone now? Why don't we leave those people resolve their problems? Why do we? Are we supporting the state of Sudan, the current state of Sudan, to fight its people? Because the state can fight its people. And indeed, I think it is fighting its people. What should have been done by an external force like Uganda was to mediate. And the mediator should not take sides. Last time we went there, you are talking about 20 what? 2011 or
2013.
The MOU?
No, before the MOU, whatever, we had gone there.
Yes.
Uganda's troops were in Sudan.
Yes.
Now the thing has flared up again. Did we resolve the problem sustainably? No. It's not sustainable to go there in a unilateral way. We need a sustainable solution where our troops, if they went to Sudan, in my opinion, they should create a buffer zone to say, you people now stop here, let's stop here, and create incentives even for Juba administration of Salva Kiir to also yield, accommodate, and have democracy, or at least have elections. But now when you go there supporting the Juba administration, the Salva Kiir will not have an incentive to work towards a democratic dispensation in South Sudan. That's my general overview.
All right, thank you very much. I would like to pick up on the debate from there. Dr. Tolit, there is a contention here regarding the approach of Uganda, operation-wise, in South Sudan, that perhaps we should have taken a multilateral approach. If you saw the bickering between UPDF and the Minister of Defense, it was that there was operational necessity. There are also cases for bilateral, military engagements. What do you make of our approach to the South Sudan conflict as a country?
Yeah, thanks so much. And I think it's a great opportunity to try and shed some light in what is going on, particularly from a geopolitical perspective. And I think that whoever were charged with making the decision of intervention in Southern Sudan, in my view, made a number of errors. One, strategically, from the Ugandan perspective, if you looked at our current state of affairs, whether political, economic, or otherwise, these issues should have come to consideration. The current political and economic trends clearly show that, for instance, Uganda is at a brink of outusing our external debt. What do they call it? In the economics, they call it external debt currency. We are just at the brink. We simply put, very soon, Uganda may not be viable to borrow. We also know that we run an economy that is almost more than 67% externally supported. We know the numbers around the youth and unemployment. We know our current poverty base. The point I'm trying to build is that any military adventure or war is an expensive adventure. So, at the time, as it were, is Uganda a viable, entity to take such an adventure? I think if it is argued in terms of national state security and sovereignty. Again, I do not see the factors in Sudan as impacting Uganda very, very, very directly. It is only up to recently that, for instance, for the very, very, very first time, our cross-border trade with Southern Sudan in terms of annual revenue return surpassed the one of Kenya, which has been our long-term trade partner. So when you draw these parameters, then the central question would be, for any strategist, do we really have to undertake this venture or not? And then two is the question of the process, because we're talking about an issue of governance. This is a national army. The laws, the legal framework is very clear. Under what circumstances you can deploy the army out of our borders. And when you are not mandated to do so. We clearly already see that this is not the first time, this is not the second time, this is not the third time, and it may not be the last, that we sort of have a clique, you know, within our national state enterprise that simply apportion the decision to deploy the army at their will. So we keep asking ourselves whether the apparatus of sovereignty still exists, and that is the trio, you know, the executive, parliament, and the judiciary. So the attitude from the executive seems to be a clear attitude of arrogance, exuding a lot of razzmatazz. The army seems to be personalized. And the other broader question would be, does it help the security in the region? I think, just like many have said, I don't think it helps. Ethiopia has come out very, very clearly and has objected to our deployment of an army in Sudan. We know that the government of Sudan, sitting at this time, particularly after the arrangement of 2018, that enabled it, you know, what they are calling the reinvigorated peace agreement, and which actually has Uganda as guarantors, because it was mediated by IGAD, and Uganda is a guarantor, and one of the and the key principle is that the issues foregoing right from the conflict of 2013 should be resolved amicably. Now, when you start having your guarantor, one of the guarantors for a peace accord, beginning to roll tanks, then what it simply means that either as singularly as a party, they have abjugated, you know, the right of guarantor to a peaceful resolution, thrown out the agreement, or they have actually realized that that agreement since fall within the cracks, and probably they are only marching forward to affirm the same. You asked a question to Professor Ndebesa about the circumstances of deployment, and you tend to insinuate that there is an agreement. I want to say that there isn't any agreement of as such. The agreement that we had was before 2016. You know, it could have been renewed, but you realize that Salva Kiir and his first vice president, Dr. Riek Machar, have actually not agreed in principle over a number of things. If you go into that agreement, you find that the agreement of 2018, or in the agreement of 2018, we have never had any opportunity for Uganda to enter a bilateral defense agreement with the expanded government.
Outside being guarantors.
Yes, after 2018.
Yes.
So it is unless somebody has that agreement, and if it is there, in terms of due process, let them bring it to the table of parliament and lay it. I really think it's an illegality. Then the other bit is that we are also signatory to international conventions, and which are very clear about the methodologies and conditions of peace deployment. So this cannot be defined as a peace deployment. It cannot be defined as peacekeeping, as the professor correctly pointed out. And they are do's and don'ts in a peacekeeping mission. First of all, the recipient state must accept. And like we have seen, and we have read in the newspapers, we have seen in the television, the general population attitude towards the UPDF forces is a one of no welcome. You know, so, and then secondly, as an immediate neighboring state with stakes, you know, political or otherwise, we cannot solely deploy a peacekeeping troop. So we are in Southern Sudan for reasons best known to some people and not everybody. Remember, if you listen to the debates in Parliament, even after they deployed and came back to Parliament to seek mandate,
retrospective.
Yes, I've not yet seen what were the arguments for the deployment. Because you cannot say you are deploying against, because you can only deploy, because remember Southern Sudan is a sovereign state. And there is also the principles, the principles of, you know, of respect, rigidity and all that around sovereign states. So you cannot say that you are deploying in Southern Sudan because you are suspecting escalation, as if you, because the intelligence of Uganda, if they correctly found out that probably there was a likely escalation, then the best they would have done in terms of, in international law, there's something they call, you know, the principle of reification, where you can actually share intelligence. So if they had good intelligence, then they should have shared it with the intelligence of Southern Sudan. You don't take it upon yourself now to go and deploy.
But perhaps just to, perhaps operationally, it is not in the best interest to disclose operational intelligence at the moment.
No, for me, I have no problem with that. One is an agreed principle. I have no problem with that. My problem is at the basics. We are operating in foreign territory. We are not even questioning the manner of operation. We are not even interested in it. For us as citizens, all we are asking, because you see, a war or a deployment of troops, and especially it's not even a UN chapter they are operating under, but the mode of operation they have undertaken looks like what they call a frontal and attack operation. War is not a cup of tea. People, Ugandans are dying. We are spending money. They have come back to Parliament now asking for money. We have a reputation as a state, you know, to protect, both to our peers, friends, and the international agencies that we cooperate with. We are affecting business. What is at stake? Because look at, say, the business of tourism. It largely depends on a clean bill of peace, you know, for a status quo.
Let me add it for you something. We are likely to be a candidate to the International Court of Justice, and we shall end up paying like we are paying in Congo, because I have heard that people have used some bombs that are not supposed to be used in currently, and other things we might do in Sudan, and we might end up being taken to the International Court of Justice, and we shall begin paying like we are paying in Congo.
Yeah, just to wind up, yes, and that is exactly, that's why I started from the point of, are we able, do we have the ability to go into the venture we have gone into? I don't think so, you know, given the underlying circumstances. You know, we are a country at the brink of debt, we have a fragile economy, we have, and then also the last thing actually is, what message are we sending to the youth? Yeah? We have a youth bulge that is largely unemployed, And one of the key national values we seem to be peddling is that there is opportunity in warmongering. So we having.
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Doctor. Of course, with the NRM's regime and the history of several wars, it seems like they have found equilibrium between spending on war and managing the fiscal, somewhere in the balance. But I'd like to come to you, Honorable. Isn't an invitation from President Salva Kiir binding or enough, sufficient for Uganda's deployment in South Sudan, also given our big brother role in really a country that is in its nascent stages?
Well, I think first I want to associate myself with the submission of Professor and Doctor on the subject, but I want to take also to contextualize it and customize it to our situation here. I had the benefit of being in the 9th Parliament, where there was a debate, and I'm on record, and they answered, and I objected to deployment of our army outside Uganda in those circumstances. When you look at our constitution, Article 208, 9, 8, 9, 10, which creates the UPDF, and 2010, which creates the police. Because we started from, the circumstances, it gives Parliament the power to authorize the President to deploy the UPDF out of the country. But when you go in the functions of the UPDF, I opined then that this authorization must be in line with the functions of the UPDF. Because what I was seeing was mercenarism, where UPDF or Ugandan security forces were all over the region. And the framers of the constitution then created it in a way that there must be a nexus between the functions and the power. The reason was simple, that one, if we are going under the multi arrangement, other than the bilateral, as it is, it's like a personal business. Because what is taking place apparently is a situation where President Museveni negotiates with fellow dictators around the area, and like our army is like for hire. and because it was making financial sense for him and those he's dealing with, now even came for police. So when they deployed our police in Chad, I asked that under what legal framework? Because at least when it comes to the army, there's a provision that the parliament will decide on the deployment of the army outside the country. Though I was also insisting that's been in line with protecting the territorial integrity of the country, not the way they are doing it as a form of a business. They took the police. I raised the matter on the floor of parliament. That can I know under which arrangement is police being deployed? If you look at the law, there is no legal provision under which they are deploying police. Now it became a business, very lucrative business. That now we are policing in other countries, very far away from the mandate. Because the mandate, if you go to the functions of the Uganda police force, is to detect and prevent crime. But now they are deploying the police to go and detect and prevent crime in a war situation where they are deploying them.
In Somalia.
In Somalia. Now they are over Chad, where I kept on asking.
We are
now
exporting stability.
Well, to me, it is warmongering. Because as long as the deployment is outside the context of the constitutional provision, the rest is like a business.
But if
I had the benefit of being a member of AfroPac. Uganda, the Public Health Committee, we had AfroPac, where we deal with countries from Africa.
Yes.
We interacted with the Accountant General of South Sudan as of then. Then he gave us information about our deployment then. Actually, our vehicles would go and pick money from Sudan, the dollars, in exchange of what we were doing there. You understand?
And that money was not going to the treasury,
No,
of
it
course.
wasn't from the treasury. You see, because you see, the accountant general, governor bank of, they stay in the same place.
They started paying money to
To bring it here. You understand? They were told that, how do you run your state, your country here? But been seeing vehicles, because this means that the abuse of the UPDF now and the police, it brings personal benefit to the individuals who are doing it outside the law. That's one. Two, now, even this bills of saying that the president can deploy and come and seek authority from parliament. It's not in the context of business.
Come and inform.
And inform. It's not the context of business. Because UPDF is not a statutory company that is owned by Mr. Museveni. If you take action, then you come and do your balancing to see how the other things are balancing or not. Because as we talk now, these MPs, you sometimes I don't want to, because I've not been an MP, but some of them are not very serious. So they take things casual. They're excited in passing the motion. Now a budget is following.
Yes.
And once the budget follows, that means that we're going to move money from the budget. This is what it means. To go and support a war which Parliament has supported. You understand? Though they don't know what was the security agreement between the President Museveni and the power that be in Sudan. You understand? Because for me, why I want to start it from a very simple way. That we are committing our natural resources, our resources, mega resources, from within our budget to the priorities of the country. Because people are even dying. Because I came reading the report about malaria. That is actually Busoga, the result of mortality rate because of malaria in Busoga. 33%, actually at the level of 33% of the when you look at the mobility rate, all patients who go into who are diagnosed with malaria in Busoga, 33% die. To me, that's a serious matter.
Serious.
So you are telling me that you are deploying in Sudan to avert a speculated war, a special effect of a war in Sudan. And even when you go there, just as Professor and Doctor have said, still we are on one side of the warring factions. You understand? To me, the danger you see, it is just, we can cause a lot of problem to Uganda. How? If you are in Chad, you are in Somalia, you are in Congo, you are in Sudan,
Central African Republic,
Central Republic,
Guinea.
you're all over.
You're in Guinea also.
You're in Guinea, you're all over. If an enemy group mobilize those embassies and mobilize those countries to support war here, what would happen? You understand? Because for me, if Parliament existed in the real sense, and it was working in the real sense, the collective debate would ensue. You understand? That's what it takes us to inform. The constitutional provisions as they are, have they been complied with? Because now, the judiciary is under capture. You can't go to court for an interpretation. You understand? You don't be just wasting time. Then the other issue, the president is abusing the constitution as is, but also must he have powers to do certain things the way they are. I'll just give an example, the abuse of the security apparatus. When the Kawempe by-election, you would meet security people having in the government guns, putting on a government uniform, brutalizing people, and the people say, no, we don't know them. Maybe they are no supporters, maybe they, you see, we take things very casual.
And recently the Minister of Internal Affairs disowned them also.
You understand? Because now we're talking about the abuse of the army. Because this situation, whatever they are doing there, I can give a guarantee they are looting. Because there is evidence that we are looted in the Congo and we are paying as taxpayers. Now they have gone to Sudan also, they also pay me in terms of dollar, in terms of maybe fuel. So at the end of the day, this is going to affect our stability. If today, yourself, you went out to Congo, not to Sudan, you can be lynched. Once you say you're Ugandan, you're not safe. If you went to Congo, you're not safe. Wherever you would go. So even in terms of individuals deriving benefit from these wars, yes, they have benefited directly. Because now as we are doing, now the government or the taxpayers are going to fund the war. Whereas the individuals are reaping from the war, buying the cotton, and also through stealing what they appropriate for the war.
Thank you very much, Honorable. Before we go into the break, Professor, I would like you to help us draw the line between legitimate bilateral military operations, for example, and what you'd consider illegitimate. A few years ago, we had the attack in in western Uganda, by elements of ADF that sparked off the Operation Shuja. And operation-wise, it was believed that they have to be pushed and buffered into Congo. How do you discern that from kind of a legitimate operation with what is in Sudan or any other places, as Honorable stated? Where do we draw the line?
The question of legitimacy is related to legality, but they are not necessarily the same thing. You can be legal but illegitimate. You can be legitimate but illegal. Now, the deployment outside Uganda is very, very complex, and in Uganda, the question of legality is almost not relevant as far as the state of Uganda is concerned. It might concern us as citizens, but the government, I think they came up with those norms from the bush, because in the bush, actually, there is almost no regulations, and they have their military regulations, but there was no law to follow and things like that. So here you just deploy without consulting Parliament, although the law demands that one, then you later inform them, just informing, because, and I heard the speaker, by the way, stopping the debate. The speaker stopped the debate. He said, now let's not discuss this one. This is a security issue. So it was just it was merely informing them. And then the speaker said, let's not debate. So it was not debated. It was not scrutinized, and also maybe to put there certain safeguards, because the parliament is supposed to be an institution for safeguarding democracy. So there were no safeguards that now our troops who have gone, okay, maybe you have sent them there, but what are their limits? Where are they going to go and where are they going to stop? You have just talked about general actually, not only Sudan. You can go to Congo. They went there supposedly to hunt ADF rebels. But now recently we had the CDF saying that they were going to capture Bunia. Bunia first. And I think they went there and captured it. I don't know whether they are rebels, ADF in Bunia town. Now he's saying we might go to Chisangani. I don't know whether ADF is in Chisangani. So you can see that the mandate reason they advanced is not what they are following up there. And before we know it, we shall be at the International Court of Justice and we shall be paying from the budget. But we can also cause trouble there in the sense that we might end up becoming enemy of a neighboring country. Like we are likely to be enemy of some forces in Sudan. So I think the way we are running a modern state is not how a state should be managed. So when we are deploying outside, we deployed in Somalia. We lost our helicopters there. I don't know who is accountable for those helicopters. We do not know. We are now deploying in Sudan without having a consensus here as to why we are deploying in Sudan. We say we are exporting peace, but there is no peace in Somalia. We have been there for how many years? Many years now, almost 2 decades or so.
But to be fair, the Mogadishu area is
Mogadishu is not Somalia. I'm talking about Somalia, and I'm talking about the citizens. But even in Mogadishu, last week the president was nearly killed. Yeah? So there is no national cohesion in Somalia. We deployed in Congo, there is no national cohesion in Congo. We deployed in Central African Republic, there is no national cohesion in Central Africa. We deployed in Chad, did you say? There is no peace or national harmony in Chad. We have been deploying in South Sudan, there is no national cohesion and harmony in Sudan. By the way, you can even have peace without cohesion. You can have peace without harmony. You can have social order without cohesion. What we are talking about is that when we are sending our forces outside the country, we should first of all note that do we have the capacity, even in terms of resources, of what consequences is it likely to be. Secondly, what are the limits, what are the regulations? Now, we have had a past experience where our troops fought in Kisangani. We sent our troops in Kisangani, they fought another country. Now, those of our soldiers who died there, our boys who died in Kisangani, who accounted for them? You know, who accounted for them and who compensated? They should be compensated even. Because why should our troops have died in Kisangani fighting Rwanda? Now not fighting the rebels in Congo, but fighting the government of Rwanda. Now supposing Ethiopia now, which does not agree to our deployment in Sudan, send there its troops and they clashed with UPDF. And who is going to be accountable for the death of our troops in Sudan and all the money we are using in Sudan? Because Parliament should have put there certain maybe regulation to say our troops are there not to be on the offensive. They could be on the defensive and only fight when they are defending themselves, especially where they have created a buffer between the Machel group and the Kiri group, so that the aim of the legitimate, let me now go to your question, the legitimate deployment of Ugandan troops outside should be to create a condition for creating an incentive for democracy to take root. So we sent our troops there. There was an agreement, and they were supposed to have elections. They didn't have elections. Now this war breaks out. We go back.
It appears the designation of, because peacekeeping would work if the division was SPLM and SPLA and SPLM, but it appears the designation of White Army is a pure rebel force that has no space for, and that's probably what is forming.
It is not a Uganda rebel force. It is a Sudan rebel force.
Yeah, what would we be? What would
they
we,
have
what
the
would
right
we
to
be
fight.
doing there?
NRA was in Mwiru, and they were fighting government, possibly not necessarily to bring anarchy, although they could bring anarchy, but possibly to create an incentive for the Juba administration of Kiri to agree to hold elections. So if we continue intervening illegitimately, in my opinion, in support of Kiri, he will not have incentives to democratize Sudan, and therefore they want to be sustainable peace in Sudan. So what we should have done would be to be there, maybe to create a temporary buffer zone and not to attack, so that the other group of the White Army remains one side and this one remains this side. And then we ask them, both groups, to actually be on the round table and have a political settlement and have elections in Sudan and move on. But now
what mandate would they be doing that? Because the constitution here tells you under some which you can go. But whatever you are discussing is outside the constitutional mandate.
The constitution of Uganda does not allow Uganda to deploy outside Uganda?
No, to deploy
It does, but under very specific circumstances.
Yeah, and
it doesn't go allow Uganda.
I think Professor disclaimed that legality is out of this.
Now that the legal question is now out, because Uganda has been in Sudan, Uganda has been in Congo, Uganda had been in Chad, it has been in Rwanda, by the way. Uganda was in Rwanda. That's, we don't talk about it. It has been in Burundi. It has been everywhere. So that is the question we are putting on the table now. Should we now be hankering on the legality and constitutionality? The reality is that we have deployed, and unfortunately our parliament has not played its role, institutional role of safeguarding the constitutionality and the constitutional regime of Uganda. The speaker could have the audacity to say, let's not discuss this matter when it is a matter of security, when it is a matter actually of existential threat of Uganda, because we can easily have a backlash. Another country can support Sudan, the one which is not the White Army, the one which can support the White Army with missiles, and before we know it, there will be missiles thrown on Kampala. because that white army can also say, since Kiri army, which is also more or less a rebel army, because really the Dinka army is also a rebel army. In the true sense of the word, putting legalities aside, that is also a rebel army. And the white army is also a rebel army. And there are other armies by the way in Sudan. It's not only those. So our troops, legality notwithstanding, should have been sent there to temporarily maybe create, to stop anarchy, let me put it that way. Stop anarchy, but create incentives for both Juba and those people are in which state?
Jonglei.
Unity. Not Unity, not Jonglei. It is Upper Nile.
Upper Nile.
I think they are currently basically in Upper Nile.
Yes, yes.
So that those forces in Upper Nile, together with their representatives in Juba, can now go on a round table with the Kiri group, which is also, in terms of legality put aside, they are also rebels. They are kind of rebels because they have failed to organize an election in Sudan. They have failed to implement the agreement. They are also, in that case, rebels of the agreement. So that we create incentives for a round table discussion. But now we are going there, incentivizing Juba, incentivizing Kiri, not to organize elections and have Sudan on the path of democracy.
Thank you very much. Our dear viewers, we shall continue this discussion. The question in the room, of course, remains, is the operations by the Ugandan forces legitimate, sheer adventurism, or exceptionalism? We shall find out more after the break. Thank you, and stick with us.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Thank you, our dear viewers. Today on Focus on Parliament, we are discussing our military operations as a country in South Sudan, particularly our forces, on the invitation of Salva Kiir, working to quash the White Army in Northeast South Sudan. And of course, the topic in the first session framed around whether these were legitimate interests, legitimate operations, or pure military adventurism. I would like to bring you in, Doctor, just to take it a notch higher. We see a wave globally of exceptionalism from what as the norms that have defined the global order for the last 80 years. We see a lot of breach of war rules, the situation in the Middle East, in Gaza, in the situation with Ukraine, and of course, perennial breaches by the United States itself. Could Uganda also be under this blanket of exceptionalism?
Is it
That is only justified. Yes, that is only justified by the consequences that, well, at the end of the day, we balance the equilibrium in the region. And of course, Uganda remains safe. I mean, I don't know what's your take on from that angle.
Yeah, that's you make a very interesting observation, and I think this is something that we probably need to interest ourselves into more, because definitely there is no doubt that other than any other time before, the notion of the world order, as we seem to understand it after 1945, has come to serious question. And this probably is more exemplified in no other circumstances other than the current regime of President Trump in the US. Take something like climate change, which is basically an imminent danger that has been both prescribed and proscribed to by eminent scientists, by serious statesmen, and then you just have this man shows up and with a very pedestrian argument, and he's saying, you know, nothing like this exists, and he's signing orders, and so what kind of precedence is he setting? I would tend to agree with your argument that this wave is sweeping, and many of us seem to be growing into it, and for some reasons, in some sections, by the way, it shouldn't be seen typically in the negative. I think some of the areas, because the world order also presented certain notions of cooperation that were really debatable and had remained elusive. I mean, for instance, take the relationship between the Francophone states and their former colonial masters, you know, either French, Belgium. You see the rising, the what you'd call the new breed of leaders at the moment. The, you know, Traore, there is the men in Burkina Faso, and all these seem to be questioning, you know, what stood out as the old long, you know, principles, and they have a point, and by extension, you know, Africa as wholesome is looking looking at and beginning to question, say for instance, rules around the World Trade Organization. We are looking at the climate debate and also asking questions about the relationships, and particularly those multilateral debates that seem to be forming up probably for the good, you know, and we hope that out of it, you know, the global industrial relations status can improve, and then maybe trade-to-trade relations can improve. But is that the case when it comes to, you know, to governance? And bringing it straight back home, my colleagues have clearly explained and demonstrated the level of our adventurism. And for me, I would want to look at this from a political economic perspective or lens. We have been to all these places named Guinea, Central African Republic, and all that. The question here is, what's the cost-benefit analysis? Have we tried to do any cost-benefit analysis? Because you see, every time we commit Uganda per se and invest out of Uganda, whether it is by way of trade, whether it's by committing our military, whether it is the cardinal principles of democracy don't go away. And one of the cardinal principles of democracy is the question of process and consensus. And in our case, we can only ably find that in the institution of parliament. So what should be worrying us or not worrying us is that, are these debates actually going on in parliament as it affects and impacts on these important issues? Like I stated before, we definitely have a fragile economy. Actually, most of the studies, it is interesting that you know, we run some kind of infra economy, whereas we portend very high growth pictures or figures. They do not, you know, eumesically create a convergence with actual development. Because when you look at the other indicators, health, education, health, education, infrastructure. We have a lot of gaps, you know. I mean, look, we've just had the rains the other day. Not even 2 days. We already have flash floods. You can't even move. So if we even calculated the monies we lost just the last 2-3 days alone, you would then ask yourself, which would be more cost effective? Have this army contained here and probably only revisit the UPDF Act and policy and try to see that we have an army that is robust, an army both for wartime and an army for peacetime. Now, what we seem to be having is an army that is constructed constantly as a war army. So you find that the leadership struggles to maintain the wage bill, because then it is more of consumptive than productive. So when you have that kind of situation, maybe the question that begs is that, is this army being maintained truly to protect the sovereignty of the country Uganda, or it is an army, it is a construct of an army, you know, to hold and maintain a given ideology?
But the argument there is that even if that were the case, it is voted upon by the nation's people within the NRM mandate.
I don't want to
go the principle being Pan-Africanism.
Don't drag.
So, I'm just giving the devil's advocate.
I am just
the devil's advocate.
I know elections go on in this country, but I just want to cast a blind eye in that direction. I don't want to be invited to that debate, because that is, I mean, look, just to give it a wimp, look at what happened in Kawempe. By the way, I was intriguingly surprised, and for me it showed me something interesting. Do you know that the registered voters in Kawempe are over 130?
199.
199,000.
They're almost
Can you imagine?
200,000.
Can you imagine? And how many people voted?
18%.
18%. So just look at that element, that amount of voter apathy. You know? So, and yes, this could be a microcosm, somebody would argue, and say maybe for purposes of survey, this is a negligible sample. But really, it can also be interpreted as a trend. We have seen this. The last presidential and parliamentary elections, I think we had registered were about 20 million, but those who actually voted were, I think, about 8 million.
Those who are counted.
Those who were counted.
Even the others are voted for. You are talking about those who are counted.
About 8 million. So 8 out of 8, we have a population now projected at about 45. Even if you took 40. So 45 by 8, that is about 6. Average 6 point something. So just look. So also the question is, what is going on in terms of the interest in elections as a framework of to support governance? You know, also as a country, we need to think that we need to invest, because look, we are going to support wars elsewhere, but we have a situation that actually is breeding and portends war. Because if you have just this fraction of people participating in the elections, year in, year out, what do we think the rest are doing?
82% express a vote of no confidence.
Yes.
What you are doing.
What do you
But
think?
even those who vote
What do you think they are doing?
do not participate. They are participated.
So the question is, does this worry us? You know, are we asking ourselves any serious question in terms of yes, I can see a wave of adventurism sweeping. I would want to warn about it. It is a dangerous way to go. Professor Ndebesa gave a very clear synopsis. Look at Afghanistan, look at Libya, look at Palestine, look at Iraq. The whole, it basically gives you a basket case. There is the only way you can guarantee good governance, the only way you can nurture democracy is to allow, and probably this also brings me back to the question of the nascent state of Southern Sudan. I think there's this great historian. I think he's called. He's Italian. I think he's a Fraser Hist, or if I get the pronunciation correct. But he argues that you cannot postpone the birth pangs of a democracy. I do not know whether we are trying to play midwifery or we are trying to abort democracy in Southern Sudan. Because the facts are on the wall. Sudan came through the South-North War. It transcended into a state, 2011. We all accepted that, okay, let them be given a chance. And they have tried it out. And every time, the mother, South Sudan, just looks like pregnant and about, we have boys going to meadow. I mean, for a mother who is at 6-7 months about just to deliver, I really that's not a woman to be courted. This should be left alone to try and nurture the baby and be able to deliver. So I think the democracy in Southern Sudan is being interrupted with. But we also need to know that this region we are in, the East Africa and the Horn, is a hotspot. We have an active conflict in the Congo. We have an active conflict now in Southern Sudan. We have a conflict that is still simmering in Ethiopia, Eritrea. We saw an ethnic explosion in Kenya. That was 1997. It featured its heads. The other day we saw the Gen Z on the streets. Rwanda had its fair share. Burundi has an active conflict. So I don't know these razzmatazz in the Ugandan leadership that makes it feel we are some kind of Jews. So
I'd like to bring in Professor on that very point. There's an old Russian saying that if you want peace, arm yourself. I don't know how we can run away from our history and our region, because prior to this government, I believe it is true that we were refugees in South Sudan and many other neighboring countries. And the idea here seems, of course, they will look at the parliamentarians as civilians on this one, but the idea here seems to be why it is better off we buffer into the neighbors than to be buffered into. It is better we fight our battles on the other side than to be fought here. What do you make of this?
First of all, that saying is about interstate wars, not intra, not within. It is across. And I must say, in Africa, generally, the problems are not interstate. It is not, African states should not be and are not under any threat of attacks from outside. The challenge is from within. And so when you militarize yourself from within, it is recipe for danger. You are going to kill each other and celebrate. I don't see how somebody becomes a hero and celebrates killing a fellow citizen. You are killing fellow citizens like these fellows who were in Kawempe, clobbering fellow citizens, and people were, some soldiers, some commanders were celebrating. So I don't think it is a matter of arming ourselves. Actually, we should demilitarize our political competition. We should demilitarize our political negotiations and build sustainable, cohesive states. If we continue militarizing ourselves, it is not sustainable anyway. You militarize today, you are having powers, tomorrow you will not have the powers, the other day you will not have this. This business even of Uganda, patting itself on the back, we are the most...
Oasis of peace.
But is there war in Tanzania? Why are we talking about Uganda when there is Tanzania which is peaceful? Relatively, it has been peaceful. It is not at war and it is not adventurous. There is Tanzania. They came here on a principled note and they removed Idi Amin and went back. They didn't remain here. Later on, actually, Nyerere even regretted why he removed Idi Amin and even stayed here for long. He said, you people fight your own wars. He later, actually, when there was a war between NRA and the UPC government, he pulled off. Said, let them solve their problem. So, as Ndugu here was saying, we are delaying the democratic process and the nation building in Sudan by intervening, actually interfering on one side. Rather than bring them for a political settlement, we are intervening on one side. That is prolonging. That is prolonging a war. And we have been doing that, by the way. Even in Somalia, we seem to be using a military strategy. Just intervening to get military solutions, not political solutions. And Somalia is not stable. We went to Kinshasa and removed the Mobutu, but we did not go there to stabilize in terms of political settlement the Congo. We went to Rwanda and more than 1 million people died. We normally talk about the unfortunate case of the Tutsi, but when this current government went to Congo, they killed possibly a number that we don't know, which could be equal to those who were killed within Rwanda. We went to Somalia. Somalia is still fighting. So where we have gone, I have heard that we are taking their peace. But I have not seen peace there anyway. I have not. Wherever we have gone, they are at war. There is no national cohesion. There is no national cohesion in Somalia. Neither is it there in Sudan. Neither is it there in Congo. Even in Rwanda, there is order. I have just said before, social order is not equal to national cohesion. I don't believe that. Social order is not equal to national cohesion. Even peace is not equal to harmony. You can have coerced peace, not harmony.
Or negative
and
peace.
That, or negative peace.
Like the one we have in Uganda.
And that is not sustainable. So this militarism that we are exporting, it is what we are exporting in our neighboring states, rather than exporting negotiation and political settlement strategies, we are exporting militarism. And militarism is not sustainable. You can see it. It is practical. The case of Somalia, they have never agreed. The case of Sudan, they have never agreed. Congo, they have not agreed. So what is peace have we extended? Because I have had this narrative that we have exported peace. Where have we exported peace? Let anybody tell me where we have exported peace. Is there peace in Congo? Is there peace in Sudan? Is there peace in Somalia? Even in Rwanda, there is peace, but there is no harmony. There is no national cohesion in Rwanda. There is no national cohesion in Rwanda and Burundi. So you could actually say that when Tanzania did what it did to remove Idi Amin and left it on our own, and we fought it on our own, we came up with this peace we have, which is not necessarily yet harmony. So Sudan should be either left alone to find its peaceful political settlement, or when we go there to intervene, not to interfere, the two are different, we can intervene under multilateral arrangement. By the way, this today, I have heard that actually Ruto has sent there Odinga. He has sent Odinga to Sudan. I don't know to do what, and on which auspices. Did anybody follow it?
He has appointed him as his envoy. to
He-
Southern, special envoy to Southern Sudan.
He's as the president of Kenya or as the chairman of East African Community?
Yeah, it's not mentioned, but I think as the president of Kenya and by extension.
But Professor, there's also customary. I don't want to call it customary international law, but that is the closest word to it. Where we have Uganda as a position, at least at the look of it, as a melting pot for regional geopolitical negotiations. Entebbe, where we see Salva Kiir, Sekendi, Ruto, and all these other leaders coming here. How do you explain that in the context of what we're discussing?
Oh, that one I must credit to Museveni. He has his skills. He has skills and he knows how to go about them. Of course, he's the eldest person. Normally people go for an elder to seek for solutions, but also in the sense that he's the eldest. And he's interested in those issues because they wouldn't go to Tanzania, which is the most peaceful in the region, because maybe the president of Tanzania is not interested in geopolitical issues. He's mainly concentrating on building a railway line to Dodoma. I don't know how far it has gone. It is almost reaching Dodoma. You know, people have priorities. So Museveni is interested in those things. You can see Pan-Africanism. I mean, these meetings we had recently, non-aligned movement and the other one, we spent a lot, by the way.
G7.
Yeah, and very many countries are not ready to host such a meetings. Uganda accepts to host because President Museveni is interested in those things. Because not that other countries don't want, but they feel it is expensive. It is expensive, but for us we spend.
But he also uses it as a decoy for his would rather be bad public relations. So he tries to, when people come and see the white paint here, they forget about the abductions of Nope.
No, diplomatic strategies. But even you can use refugees as a diplomatic strategy to legitimize yourself. You say, no, you benefit. The refugees, of course, when they come, they benefit. But you also they benefit in terms of public image, international image. And these Ugandans can go and be clobbered in Kawempe as long as there is that international image. And you know, there won't be diplomatic pressure from outside because you are hosting refugees. You won't have the diplomatic pressure, and you'll move on. You know, it is Museveni's skills. I must credit him for that because he can say, okay, we are hosting refugees and they continue coming, yet we don't have money to look after them and things like that. But anyway, somehow we get money from outside to look after refugees, but also we get that image that we are stable as we clobber these politicians in Kawempe. You know, those are political skills, but we shouldn't do it at the expense of national integration. Me, my petty subject is national integration, national cohesion, national harmony of African states. We had problems of foreign rule. We somehow dealt with it, although we have some neocolonialism. Next, we should address the question of national cohesion, national identity, because if we don't address the question of ethnicity, religious sectarianism and ethnicity, and we don't create national identities in Africa, this aid we get, I normally even exchange it with diplomats when I get opportunity to meet them. They have concentrated on building state institutions. But in Africa, we have got states without nations. We have got states which are pursuing nationhood. You see, in Europe, it was the other way around. They had nations which pursued statehood and achieved it. Here we have states created by the colonialists, and we are pursuing nationhood. But we don't seem to be focusing on it as a strategy to create nationhood. What is happening in Sudan is a crisis of nationhood. Each tribe thinks that it is a nation and it has no business cooperating with the other tribe. And each tribe, each of the leaders behaves as a tribal leader. He does not transcend that mentality of a tribal leader to look at the nationhood. So can the development partners, can the regional organizations try to pursue the strategy of creating nations And when we are doing that, we should not do it bilaterally and unilaterally. We should use multilateral negotiations and multilateral strategies under the auspices of regional organizations that we are not missing. We have East African Community, we have IGAD, we have AU, we have International Institute for the Great Lakes region. I think they were meeting here, but they are still around. Why don't we use those auspices to multilaterally have concerted efforts to address those questions in Sudan? We know multilateralism, agreement and the sending of troops can delay until there is anarchy. But still, Uganda can go alone, but under the umbrella of East African Community, whereby regulations overseeing those operations in Sudan will be in Arusha, will be fellow heads of state. But you don't go as an individual and you stop a war. The other day between Machar and Salva Kiir, we come back, hardly a decade has passed, we are now back. No, we are postponing problems, and that's not the way to build sustainable peace.
All right, thank you very much. And I think from your discussion, what I pick is that we also need to look inward, because as you have said, African states tend to crumble from within, and I think that is when
that's the problem.
That is when the neighbors or whichever forces take advantage.
Yeah, but they shouldn't take advantage under Pan-Africanism. They should help. We cannot say you are a Pan-Africanist, like the way President Kagame says it. He tells Kisekedi, those are your problems. Those are your internal problems. Go and solve your internal problems. Come on.
But it could also be in the interest of global players that, you know, the divisions.
The global players will always be there, as General Mugisha normally puts it. He has an analogy which I like. He says that when you have got your immunity, internal immunity compromised, all opportunistic diseases will attack you. So if we have our internal problems like they are in Congo, Sudan, or Somalia, these other opportunistic Western or Eastern or Chinese or whatever will take advantage. Let's solve our problems and strengthen ourselves, and our bodies become immune. Then we can ward off all these opportunistic infections that are coming from outside. But you don't weaken your internal immunity. And when opportunistic diseases come, you say, I am dying of TB, but it was HIV. If we had addressed HIV, maybe TB would not have come.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Professor, I would like to now come to you, Honorable. Looking at our military adventurism or operations out of the country, how do you think they affect our governance internally? We are going into elections, we are going into, at some point, a transition. So how do we relate these two?
Well, when you say ours, it creates a presupposition that I'm part of.
Yeah, but you're Uganda.
That no,
and the member of the political class.
What actually, that first takes me to a discussion.
Yes.
I think Professor here will have to help us that there must be a discussion. Because what I'm seeing is imperialism. That Uganda wants to engage into imperialism by going on in all these nation states. Just like the colonials used the coercive arms they had by then to beat us into submission. The government of Uganda, under the leadership of President Museveni, he has the UPDF. You understand? Whereas has been using the UPDF as a personal army to do his adventurism, the country has been affected. Because when we go into the looting, like which took place in Congo, the repercussions affected the country. I think the discussion must start as a country to say we saw. Can
I give you a concept around that imperialism we are talking about?
Yes.
The colonialists, when they were coming, they came under the pretext of civilizing mission.
Yes.
Now we are going under the pacification mission to those neighboring states when we could be having some vested interests in those regions.
And from when you look at the global politics now, we have seen America being all over because they have some interests.
Vested,
Yes, vested interests.
and disorganizing people.
In those areas. The debate now must start. In the geopolitics, are we seeing now Uganda coming out openly to say, as Uganda, what is our aggression policy and what is the interest of the country vis-a-vis the interest of the individuals? You understand? Because if we don't go into that discussion, those who are privy to information, we know. Like you have been seeing at the international market where they have been selling gold. If you look at what we sell vis-a-vis what is being mined here, it is crystal clear that the gold is coming from Congo. Professor, you have been seeing that. You understand?
Uganda, gold is the biggest export earner for Uganda now.
2022, 2023, our gross earning was $436 million.
Yes.
2024, 2025, it has jumped to $243 million.
Already.
Yes,
by March.
Yes. That is when we are pursuing ADF now in the Congo. You understand? But now the question is...
But to be fair, we
yes.
also opened one.
No, I'm saying, what I'm saying.
In Busia.
No, what I'm saying. Yeah, I'm sure I've been there. I know what is taking place actually, like in Namaingo.
Using very...
Like actually, I will tell you, we signed off our gold mines in Namaingo at $400 billion. Gold worth it, 16 trillion. You understand? But I don't want to, for today, to go into that. What I'm saying...
Yes. You know what is the poverty level of Namaingo?
I know we signed off the rare metals, but I don't want to go into that discussion. Because now it is crystal clear that I don't want to call them foreigners, but they are. If you look at the multinational interests here, you will realize that the Chinese are in the gold, in the Busoga. The Americans are in the rare metals, in the Busoga. The Indians are in the sugarcane, in the Busoga. You understand? Now we are saying, okay, fine. They have come. Today here, if you go to the Chinese, any bidding process of any road, any tender here, and the Chinese embassy, they have a technical team. That whichever Chinese wanted to bid for business here, they would provide the technical support and they would find the money to fund. And they would work very to ensure that the funding comes from China. They have come out clear on what they are doing on that front. Now that it is there is an unrebuttable presumption of aggression.
Honorable Mwiru, are you suggesting that our Minister of Defense should emulate that principle that we have a technical defense committee, or that anybody who is interested in military venturism in the region can come and consult for a fee.
And they should co-opt you.
Yeah,
this is an expert. He's an expert.
Doctors are experts. Doctors told us.
I hope you are also an expert.
The gold earnings have actually come out as he has said. The question would be, where is next? And what can we achieve? And how does it impact on the economy? Because you see, there must be... So that we know. Because if we make the whites, wherever they are, all the aggressors here, those who participate in colonialism here, they will paint a picture that actually the both civilization, you see, because for them, as they are working, because they have done it for years and years, you understand? They even left their tools of colonization here. They were never decommissioned. You understand? They're still in charge. That's why they can raise a whip and say, yo, why are you in Sudan?
As they have done.
But Uganda cannot question them, why are you in Ukraine? You understand? But you see, that time you saw Trump trying to push the president of Ukraine into signing off almost their national...
No, we can't accept that we don't have leaders with strengths. Because South Africa has told the USA to get out of Middle East, and then the USA, Trump, chased the ambassador. South Africa said, you can chase him, we shall still support the Palestinians.
in that direction. So for me, you see, I think, as the professor said, that President Museveni is the elder. And when President Museveni had just come into power, it was very ideological. You understand? Leave alone that now he has taken he has purely behaved in some instance like a chief agent of imperialism here, which I have a problem with. Because the question is that where is the interest of Uganda? He has behaved as a chief agent of imperialism by protecting him to stay in the power. You understand? But at the cost of Uganda, because like here, Professor gave you an example. If you organize a national exercise, you talk about democracy, that the process that you see UPDF is in Sudan to ensure that there's democracy in Sudan. You have organized democracy here, which has been shunned. Kawempe is just a live example, where you have 190 something voters. You claim in a voter update, 21% of the voters turned up to do the update. But the final tally result of the entire process is producing 18% of the population. That means that there is a vote of no confidence in the exercise. In that meaning that we must even ourselves define democracy. Must it be as it was left in the governance tool of democracy here? Or we need to get the professors of this world, the doctors, and define our own democracy. What actually it is. You understand? Because for me, I'm one of those who believe that we must decommission the tools of colonialism. Because Professor talks about Pan-Africanism, but he does not believe in Pan-Ugandaism, Pan-Musogaism, Pan-Ugandaism. Because there's nothing you are promoting.
I believe in Pan-Ugandaism.
But Pan-Musogaism.
Pan-Musogaism can be there.
Pan-Musogaism,
Yes.
because you see, Pan-Musogaism would make us question and say, okay, God has graced us now for like a Musoga, the land of 2 lakes and 2 rivers. You understand? With all the natural resources.
And sugarcane.
How do we
Because
organize,
it also defines them.
Yes, it also defines us. How do we organize the population alongside the people's economic lifeline, which are the cooperatives, which is the sugarcane, which is the iron ore, which is the
rare earth minerals.
Because today, if you Google, all the raw material for making these iPhones, the laptops, is coming from to China. If you Google, clearly, it is showing. Now, Professor is telling me I continue believing in the nationalism
In Uganda.
which is not leaving me with anything, because as anything is coming to the center, the power that be, they're squandering it the way they want, and the Musoga will remain with nothing. So the debate must be there.
Federalism.
How do we believe in Pan-Ankolism, Pan-Musogaism? Society, what brings us together is unity and diversity. We come together on the table as equals to say Musogas, people's lives must be organized around people's economic lifeline. We wish Ankole well, we wish Teso well, we wish Uganda well. But what is that which binds us together?
And who will be the leader of Musoga?
Of course, now that is a question which must also be discussed. You understand? Because at least there is some agreement that if you're going to talk about unity, there must be units and viable units.
We shall see during the elections how united you are. Let's
Okay,
wait.
Thank you very much. That brings us to the end of the close of this discussion today. I really appreciate you all for being here today. Issues of geopolitics are layered and really complex, but I think we have done a good job to shed light. It leaves the listeners with the opportunity to make strong but informed opinions, but also persuasive opinions. And at the end of the day, it's through quality debates that we find a way forward as a country. With that, I'll permit me close and bring to an end today's episode of Focus on Parliament. Thanks for being with me today. I remain Okot Olaa, your host. Thank you.